The pyramids, they tell you that it was all made with round balls of stone and flint chisels. For 25 years, you have to be putting one block of stone in place every 5 minutes, every day, for 25 years.
So you can understand why people start to question the historical narrative.
The reality of them is probably stranger and more interesting than anything people can think up in terms of fiction. The Great Pyramid, mostly that's the one that's been studied. We actually haven't done a whole lot of studying on the other pyramids. It's something that's severely lacking. In fact, we've not even cleared off the bases of some of the other pyramids up at Giza. It's crazy.
So you can understand why people start to question the historical narrative.
The reality of them is probably stranger and more interesting than anything people can think up in terms of fiction.
For centuries, we've believed that the ancient Egyptians were the masterminds behind this architectural marvel. But what if they weren't? What if instead, they simply moved into these colossal structures? Join us as we explore groundbreaking theories, unravel new discoveries, and challenge everything we thought we knew about one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
I'm willing to accept that the Great Pyramid was largely completed by the ancient Egyptians.
The Great Pyramid of Giza, built during the 4th dynasty of Egypt for Pharaoh Khufu around 2580 to 2560 BC, has long captured the imagination of people worldwide. The discovery of its entrance and the subsequent exploration of its interior chambers have significantly deepened our understanding of ancient Egyptian architecture and burial practices. For centuries, the entrance to this monumental structure was a mystery. Originally, the pyramid was encased in smooth Tura limestone, which concealed any openings. By the time explorers began their quest, most of this casing had been stripped away, revealing the underlying structure.
The Great Pyramid was sealed. It was a sealed monument.
The first recorded discovery of the entrance dates back to 820 AD, when the Caliph al-Mamun ordered an expedition to uncover the pyramid's secrets.
The Caliph al-Mamun, who was running Egypt at the time, wanted to get inside the Great Pyramid.
His workers supposedly found the hidden entrance after hearing a stone fall within the pyramid. They located the entrance about 17 meters above the ground on the northern face, slightly to the east of the central axis. This discovery led them to a descending passageway. From the entrance, the descending passageway measures about 1.2 meters high and 3.5 wide, sloping downwards at an angle of approximately 26 degrees.
Is there not a hidden chamber as well?
In fact, there is a whole underworld at Giza. This is beginning to be recognized.
This passage extends for about 105 meters into the pyramid, eventually reaching the Subterranean Chamber, also known as the Pit. This chamber lies beneath the pyramid, carved into the bedrock, and is unfinished, roughly hewn, and not fully smoothed out like other parts of the pyramid. Measuring approximately 27 by 14 meters and about 8.6 meters high at its highest point, the chamber's purpose remains unclear.
We actually don't know what these chambers were for. No burial of any pharaoh was ever found inside the Great Pyramid.
Some theories suggest it was an early attempt at a burial chamber or simply an unfinished part of the construction. Halfway along the descending passageway, an ascending passageway branches off upwards. Similar in dimensions to the descending passageway, it extends for about 39 meters before reaching the Grand Gallery. The entrance to the ascending passageway was originally concealed by a stone block, adding an extra level of security. The Grand Gallery is one of the pyramid's most impressive features. It is a steeply inclined corridor, measuring about 46.6 meters in length, 8.6 meters in height, and 2.1 meters in width at the base, narrowing slightly towards the top. The walls of the Grand Gallery are lined with precisely cut stones, and the ceiling consists of corbelled stone blocks, creating a vaulted appearance. The floor has a series of slots, possibly for the placement of beams or to aid in the transportation of heavy objects. Approximately halfway along the Grand Gallery, a horizontal passageway leads to the so-called Queen's Chamber. This chamber is smaller than the King's Chamber, measuring about 5 3/4 meters by 5 1/4 meters, with a height of 6 1/4 meters. The walls are smooth and the ceiling is pointed, forming a gabled roof. The exact purpose of the Queen's Chamber is still debated. It might have been intended as a secondary burial chamber or a symbolic chamber for the pharaoh's spirit. Continuing up the Grand Gallery, a horizontal passage leads to the King's Chamber, the most important room in the pyramid. The King's Chamber is rectangular, measuring about then and half by 5.2 meters, and has a flat roof composed of massive granite beams. The chamber's walls are also lined with granite, and the floor consists of large granite blocks. Inside the King's Chamber is a large granite sarcophagus, believed to have held Khufu's body. The sarcophagus is too large to have been brought in through the existing passages, indicating it was placed during the construction of the pyramid. Above the King's Chamber are 5 relieving chambers, designed to distribute the weight of the pyramid and prevent the roof of the King's Chamber from collapsing. These chambers are separated by large horizontal slabs of granite, each layer relieving some of the weight above. In recent times, advanced technologies like ground-penetrating radar and muon tomography have been employed to explore the pyramid further. These methods have led to the discovery of previously unknown voids and chambers, such as the Scan Pyramid's Big Void, a large empty space above the Grand Gallery discovered in 2017. The purpose of this void remains a mystery and continues to be a topic of ongoing research and speculation. The area surrounding the Great Pyramid of Giza, also known as Khufu's Pyramid, has been a treasure trove of archaeological discoveries.
I think there's a lot more remains to be discovered under the Giza Plateau.
Yeah.
These finds offer remarkable insights into ancient Egyptian civilization, their burial practices, religious beliefs, and daily life. One of the most intriguing discoveries is the solar boat pits, unearthed in 1954 by Egyptian archaeologist Kamal El-Malakh. These pits contain 2 intact boats buried near the Great Pyramid, positioned on the southern side. Known as solar barks, these boats were believed to serve a dual purpose. They were intended for Khufu's journey with the sun god Ra across the sky during the day and through the underworld at night. Another theory suggests they might have been used in the funerary procession of the pharaoh. The boats are made of Lebanese cedar wood, meticulously assembled without nails. The larger boat measures about 43.6 meters in length and features a sophisticated design with a cabin, oars, and rope bindings, using a technique known as mortise and tenon. The first boat was painstakingly reconstructed over 14 years by Egyptian conservator Ahmed Youssef Mustafa and is now displayed in the Khufu Boat Museum beside the Great Pyramid. The second boat remains in situ, awaiting advanced preservation techniques. In the early 1990s, Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass and his team made a groundbreaking discovery southeast of the Great Pyramid, the tombs of the workers who built the pyramids. The tombs provided evidence that the builders were paid laborers who worked in 3-month rotating shifts, reflecting the societal structure and economy of the Old Kingdom. The tombs contained skeletal remains showing signs of healed injuries, indicating that workers had access to medical care. Pottery shards, tools, and remnants of food supplies such as bread and beer were also found, shedding light on their diet and daily life. The presence of beef and fish bones suggests that the workers received good nutrition. The tombs were simple, yet carefully constructed from mud brick and limestone, indicating a level of respect for the workers. Some tombs had hieroglyphic inscriptions and modest grave goods, signifying the workers' social status and the reverence afforded to them. Another significant discovery was made in 1925 by American archaeologist George Reisner when he uncovered the Mastaba of Queen Hetepheres I, the mother of Khufu, in the Giza necropolis. Located to the northeast of the Great Pyramid, the tomb was initially hidden under debris. The tomb contained a large cache of funerary equipment, including a golden throne, a gilded bed with a canopy, chairs, a palanquin, and various personal items such as jewelry and cosmetic boxes. The craftsmanship of these items highlights the luxurious lifestyle of the royal family and the high level of artisanship of the period. Interestingly, Hetepheres' body was never found, leading to theories that her mummy might have been relocated or never placed in the tomb. Some suggest the burial equipment might have been prepared in anticipation of her death, but used for another purpose. The remains of Khufu's pyramid temple have been uncovered through various excavations conducted over the years, with significant contributions from archaeologists such as Mark Lehner and Zahi Hawass. The pyramid temple was a site for offerings and rituals to honor the deceased pharaoh Khufu. It played a central role in the funerary cult, where daily rituals and ceremonies ensured the pharaoh's immortality. The temple's remains include large limestone blocks, column bases, and fragments of statues and altars. The temple layout typically featured a courtyard, a hypostyle hall, and sanctuaries. The temple was connected to the pyramid by a causeway, which was used for processional purposes. Various small artifacts, including inscribed blocks, offering tables, and fragments of statues, have been found. These artifacts shed light on the religious practices of the time, the artistic styles, and the materials used. Notably, fragments of a life-size statue of Khufu have been uncovered, providing insights into the pharaoh's appearance and royal iconography. The tomb of Khufu, discovered by archaeologists in the early 20th century, is also referred to as the Fourth Pyramid due to its unique design. Located to the southeast of the Great Pyramid within the Giza necropolis, the tomb features a unique design that combines elements of both a pyramid and a mastaba. It includes a stepped pyramid base with a superstructure that might have been intended as a pyramid but was left unfinished.
The Great Pyramid, mostly that's the one that's been studied. We actually haven't done a whole lot of studying on the other pyramids. In fact, we've not even cleared off the bases of some of the other pyramids up at Giza. It's crazy. I mean, there's giant underground networks of tunnels underneath Saqqara, I think underneath Giza, all over Egypt. The Sphinx is not like a built thing, like they carved down into the ground and then they shaped it out of bedrock.
Beneath the sands of the Giza plateau lies the Osiris shaft, a mysterious underground structure that baffles archaeologists and captivates history enthusiasts.
They did discover that somewhere underneath the area of the front paws, there was a hollow area.
This subterranean marvel, with its intricate architecture and profound symbols, offers glimpses into ancient Egyptian religious and ceremonial practices. The mysteries of the Osiris shaft invite us to explore its true purpose and the advanced knowledge behind its construction. Known since the late 19th century, the Osiris shaft initially did not attract much attention from early explorers and Egyptologists, who focused more on the prominent features like the Great Pyramids and the Sphinx. As a less conspicuous feature, it remained largely unexplored until the late 20th century, when systematic exploration began.
So we do know the Sphinx does have hollow areas. It's just the government doesn't want to admit that that's the case.
The turning point came with the work led by the renowned Egyptologist Zahi Hawass in the 1990s. Under his direction, comprehensive exploration of the shaft was undertaken, which unveiled its complex architecture and potential significance in understanding Egyptian religious practices.
The Sphinx is hidden underneath the Sphinx. So can you give us permission to drill?
The exploration of the Osiris shaft involved the challenging task of removing water that had accumulated in the lower levels, especially the third level, which was partially submerged.
That the water began to rise in front of the Sphinx temple outside.
Modern pumping equipment was employed to drain the water, allowing archaeologists access to the shaft's deepest parts. The detailed examination of the shaft's architecture revealed the engineering skills of ancient Egyptians. It consists of 3 levels, each serving a different purpose, with the lowest level housing a large stone sarcophagus in a chamber filled with water, suggesting a symbolic representation of the underworld. The second level contained 6 burial shafts, though they were found empty, leading to speculation about their original use. This finding was significant in understanding burial practices and the possible ceremonial use of the shaft. Although largely devoid of inscriptions that could provide direct information about its creators or construction dates, the excavation unearthed several artifacts, including pottery shards and fragments of stone vessels, offering some clues about the shaft's age and use. Dating the Osiris shaft has been challenging due to the lack of inscriptions and the mixed nature of the artifacts found within. However, based on the style of pottery and other items, as well as architectural features, archaeologists suggest that the shaft might date from the New Kingdom period, with some elements possibly being older or reused from earlier periods. The Osiris shaft, a mysterious and elaborate underground complex, has sparked intense scholarly debate and speculation due to its unique architectural features and symbolic elements.
It's a subterranean complex, so it's a very complicated, incredibly enigmatic place.
Scholars and archaeologists have proposed various theories about its purpose, drawing on evidence from Egyptian mythology, religious practices, and archaeological findings. These theories primarily revolve around the shaft's connection to the cult of Osiris, the god of the afterlife, death, and rebirth, and its potential use in ancient ceremonial practices. Osiris, one of the most important gods in the ancient Egyptian pantheon, symbolizes the cycle of death and rebirth. The water-filled chamber at the bottom of the Osiris shaft is believed to symbolize the underworld, or the primordial waters of Nun, from which all life emerged according to Egyptian cosmology. This chamber, especially with its central stone sarcophagus, could represent the tomb of Osiris and the place of his resurrection. The presence of a large stone-carved sarcophagus in the deepest chamber is seen as a direct reference to Osiris's burial. Although empty, this sarcophagus serves as a powerful symbol of Osiris's death and his role in the afterlife, potentially used in rituals emulating his resurrection. One prevalent theory is that the Osiris shaft was used for initiation rites into the mysteries of Osiris. These rites would have been designed to impart secret knowledge and spiritual rebirth to initiates, mirroring the death and resurrection of Osiris. The descent through the shaft's levels could symbolize the initiate's journey through death to enlightenment and rebirth, with each level representing a stage of spiritual transformation. The shaft may have also been used for rituals celebrating the cyclical nature of life and death, reflecting the agricultural significance of the Nile's flooding and the seasonal growth cycles associated with Osiris. Such rituals could involve the symbolic planting of seeds, water libations, and recitations of hymns and prayers, aiming to ensure the regeneration of life and the fertility of the land. Another speculation ties the Osiris shaft to ancient Egyptian astronomy, particularly the belief in the stars as the destination of the soul in the afterlife. The orientation and structure of the shaft might have had astronomical significance, aligning with specific stars or constellations believed to be associated with Osiris and the afterlife. While direct archaeological evidence supporting these theories is limited, the design of the Osiris shaft and the artifacts found within it offer indirect clues. The careful construction of the shaft, the choice of its location near the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid, and the selection of objects placed in the smaller chambers suggest a deliberate attempt to create a sacred space imbued with religious and symbolic meanings. Textual evidence from ancient Egyptian religious texts, such as the Pyramid texts and the Book of the Dead, which contain references to the afterlife and the journey of the soul, provides a contextual backdrop for interpreting the Osiris shaft. These texts describe the landscape of the afterlife, including the presence of water, boats, and the significance of the sarcophagus, all of which find echoes in the physical structure of the Osiris shaft. The Osiris shaft showcases the architectural ingenuity of ancient Egyptian civilization, constructed deep within the limestone bedrock and organized into 3 distinct levels connected by vertical shafts. This site blends the practical with the mystical. Let's explore the architecture and structure of the Osiris shaft, examining each level's design, construction, and potential significance. The engineering and architectural design of the Osiris shaft demonstrate advanced planning and knowledge of subterranean construction techniques. The entrance is a rectangular opening, a deliberate design choice marking the beginning of a descent into the earth.
That's the access to the underground area of the Sphinx. The government put it there on purpose.
This opening leads directly to a vertical shaft carved straight down into the limestone, requiring precise control to maintain the shaft's integrity and direction. The shaft descends approximately 10 meters to the first level. The construction of this shaft involved removing tons of limestone using tools made from harder stones, copper, and possibly bronze, as well as ropes and wooden scaffolding for debris removal. The initial chamber at this level is relatively modest in size and devoid of elaborate decorations or significant artifacts. Its simplicity suggests it may have served as an antechamber or a preparatory space for deeper levels, possibly intended for purification or other preliminary rites. A second vertical shaft leads from the first level down an additional 20 meters, indicating a continuation of the journey into the depths. This shaft's construction would have been even more challenging due to the depth and the need to ensure ventilation and structural stability. This more extensive chamber houses 6 burial shafts, which were found empty, hinting at possible looting or a symbolic use. The creation of these shafts within the chamber's floor showcases a complex understanding of space utilization and the cultural importance of burial practices. The empty burial shafts might have been intended for actual interments or served a ceremonial purpose, perhaps symbolizing the passage to the afterlife. Their presence speaks to the shaft's potential role in funerary rites or as a cenotaph. The third and deepest level is accessed via another shaft from the second level, descending around 30 meters below the surface. This final descent marks the culmination of the journey into the underworld, mirroring the mythological descent of Osiris. Dominated by a large stone sarcophagus, this chamber is a dramatic representation of the tomb of Osiris. The partial filling of this chamber with water from the natural aquifer links the Osiris shaft to the mythological themes of rebirth and purification. Water, a symbol of life and regeneration, would have held profound religious significance, enhancing the chamber's sanctity as a representation of Osiris's tomb. Surrounding the central sarcophagus are smaller chambers that contained mummified remains and artifacts. Graham Hancock, a British author known for his unconventional theories about ancient civilizations, has posited several intriguing ideas regarding the Osiris shaft and the broader context of ancient Egyptian monuments.
Is there not a hidden chamber as well?
In fact, there is a whole underworld at Giza. This is beginning to be recognized.
Hancock's work, which spans several books including Fingerprints of the Gods and Magicians of the Gods, often challenges the orthodox archaeological understanding of history. His theories, while controversial among mainstream scholars, have sparked considerable interest and debate among the public and alternative researchers.
I think there's a lot more remains to be discovered under the Giza Plateau.
Yeah.
A central theme in his work is the hypothesis of a lost advanced civilization that predates known history. He suggests that this civilization possessed sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, architecture, and mathematics, which was passed down to later cultures, including the ancient Egyptians.
But remember that the ancient Egyptians tell us in many of their texts that everything they knew was a legacy.
He suggests these events led to significant rises in sea levels and could have been responsible for the demise of the advanced civilization he hypothesizes. The Osiris shaft's lower levels being filled with water could be interpreted within Hancock's framework as symbolic or actual evidence of these cataclysmic events. He might view the water in the shaft as a deliberate reference to the ancient floods and the civilization's knowledge of these cataclysmic events.
He knew a mystery when he saw it, and he couldn't explain it. We should be open-minded enough to consider the possibility that some of the answers may sit outside of our current perspective.
What do conventional archaeologists say when they're confronted by all of this data?
Ever wondered what went on inside those magnificent pyramids of ancient Egypt? Well, buckle up, because we're about to delve into the fascinating world of the ancient pyramid texts. These inscriptions carved onto the pyramid walls around 2400 to 2300 BCE are like a window into the hearts and minds of the people who built these incredible structures. These texts weren't just random scribbles, they were meticulously crafted during a pivotal period in Egyptian history, the twilight of the Old Kingdom. This era is famous for the iconic pyramids, those towering tombs for pharaohs. The pyramids themselves are a testament to the Egyptians' architectural genius and their deep understanding of math and engineering. But the pyramid texts are more than just historical footnotes. They're the earliest known religious writings from Egypt, offering a glimpse into the beliefs and practices of this ancient civilization. They're like cultural snapshots showing how art, architecture, and religion were all woven together. The pyramids themselves were seen as the ultimate expression of both religious devotion and the pharaoh's supreme power. Speaking of power, the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom weren't just seen as leaders, they were considered living gods. This concept of divine kingship was the glue that held society together, justifying the pharaoh's absolute authority. The pyramid texts are all about this. They're basically spells and instructions meant to help the pharaoh navigate the afterlife and join the gods, further solidifying the idea of their godlike status. Imagine a society where the pharaoh is at the top of the pyramid, wielding immense power. That's exactly what the Old Kingdom was like. This centralized system allowed them to mobilize the massive resources and manpower needed to build the pyramids. It also meant the government had a tight grip on things, controlling people and resources to a great extent. But running a complex society like this wasn't a walk in the park. It required a well-oiled bureaucratic machine, and that's what the Egyptians had. This network of officials kept things running smoothly, organizing labor, managing resources, and handling the countless details of daily life. It was a sophisticated system for a sophisticated society. We've talked about the cultural significance of the pyramid texts and the social structure of the Old Kingdom, but how did they manage to pull off such massive building projects? Building a pyramid wasn't like putting together a piece of IKEA furniture. It required serious resources and manpower. Imagine this: hauling giant blocks of stone, transporting them for miles, and feeding a whole army of workers for years on end. That's what the Egyptians had to do to build the pyramids. It was a massive undertaking, requiring a well-oiled economic engine. Here's where things get interesting. Contrary to popular belief, the pyramids weren't built by slaves, but by a paid workforce. These workers were likely skilled laborers, artisans, and even seasonal workers, and they were treated pretty well. We found evidence of medical care, food, and even some form of compensation. So how could they afford all this? The answer lies in a concept called economic surplus. Basically, they had enough resources left over after taking care of basic needs like food and shelter to invest in these grand projects. This surplus came from their mastery of agriculture thanks to the Nile River's annual floods. These floods enriched the land and allowed them to grow more food than they needed to survive, freeing up people to work on other things like, you guessed it, building pyramids. But the pyramids are more than just piles of stone, they're symbols too. Many believe they represent the rays of the sun, a pathway for the pharaoh's soul to reach the heavens. This symbolism is deeply connected to the pyramid texts, which are filled with references to the sun god Ra. It all goes back to the Egyptians' belief system, where religion, royalty, and the universe were all interconnected. Speaking of connections, the pyramid texts are like the great-grandparents of later Egyptian religious texts. They paved the way for things like the coffin texts and the Book of the Dead. These later texts show how Egyptian beliefs evolved over time, adapting and becoming more accessible to people beyond just the pharaohs. So we've explored the economic engine behind the pyramids and the deeper meaning they hold. But let's not forget the pyramids themselves. They weren't just giant piles of stone. They were meticulously designed and built with a specific purpose in mind. Imagine these pyramids as giant tombs, built to house the bodies and possessions of pharaohs after they passed away. But they weren't just storage units. They were designed to help the pharaoh's soul on its journey to the afterlife, and that's where the pyramid texts come in. These inscriptions were like a guidebook for the pharaoh's soul, offering spells and protection every step of the way. The most famous pyramid containing these texts belongs to Unas, the last ruler of the 5th dynasty. His pyramid, located in Saqqara, was the first to include these inscriptions, paving the way for future pharaohs to follow suit. Think of it like a new trend. Once Unas did it, other pharaohs like Teti, Pepi the I, and even Pepi II decided they wanted pyramid texts too. These texts weren't just scribbled on any old piece of papyrus. They were painstakingly carved into the very walls of the pyramids by skilled artisans. Imagine the dedication and precision it took to etch those intricate hieroglyphs into stone. This not only shows the skill of the craftsman, but also highlights the importance of the texts themselves. They were considered so sacred and valuable that they deserved a permanent and prominent place within the pyramids. Speaking of sacredness, these texts were like the holy scripts of their time. They contained spells, prayers, and hymns, all designed to ensure the pharaoh's safe passage to the afterlife and even his transformation into a god. The fact that they were placed inside the pyramids, which were themselves seen as sacred spaces, further emphasizes their importance. But here's the interesting part. Initially, these texts were an exclusive club. Only the pharaohs got to enjoy their benefits, further solidifying their divine status in society. It kind of reflects the hierarchical structure of the time, where access to certain religious practices and texts was restricted to the privileged few. However, things eventually changed. Over time, the concepts and spells found in the pyramid texts started to trickle down to the broader Egyptian population. This led to the development of the coffin texts, and later the famous Book of the Dead. These later texts mark a turning point, making spells and rituals for the afterlife more accessible, not just for the pharaohs but for regular people too. So the pyramid texts, originally exclusive to the pharaohs, became the seed for a more democratic approach to the afterlife in ancient Egypt. Now, imagine unearthing a piece of history that rewrites what we know about writing. That's exactly what happened in the 1920s when the Kish tablet was discovered in the ancient city of Kish, Mesopotamia. This wasn't just any clay tablet. It was a game changer, offering a glimpse into the very origins of writing and the fascinating society that developed it. Kish was no ordinary town. Located along the Euphrates River, it was a bustling hub of trade, politics, and culture, attracting people from far and wide. This melting pot of cultures likely played a key role in the birth of writing, as different people brought their own symbols and ways of record-keeping, eventually leading to the development of proto-cuneiform script. The discovery of the Kish tablet itself is a story of collaboration. Archaeologists from the Field Museum of Natural History, led by Stephen Langdon, joined forces with other experts to uncover the secrets of Kish. Back then, excavation techniques were evolving, becoming more systematic and meticulous, which was crucial for carefully preserving and documenting this historic find. But what's so special about this tablet? Well, the writing system on it is like a Rosetta Stone of the ancient world. It's one of the earliest examples of written communication, showcasing the transition from picture-based symbols to the complex wedge-shaped script known as cuneiform. This shift reflects the growing complexity of Sumerian society, as people needed new ways to keep track of things. The creation and use of the Kish tablet also hint at a well-organized society. Imagine a city-state managing resources, governing its people, and even engaging in trade with other regions. Writing wasn't just about leaving messages, it was essential for recording transactions, laws, and important decisions. But the impact of writing goes beyond practicalities. It opened doors for cultural expression and the preservation of knowledge. With writing, the Sumerians could record their myths, laws, and historical events, ensuring they weren't lost to time. This paved the way for the rich literary traditions that flourished in the ancient Near East. The Kish tablet is a reminder that writing wasn't just a random invention. It was a necessity for keeping complex societies running smoothly. It also opened doors for cultural exchange and the preservation of knowledge across generations. This discovery continues to spark debates among scholars, with some questioning whether writing originated independently in Mesopotamia or was influenced by other cultures. The mystery surrounding the exact function and content of the tablet adds to its allure, making it a captivating piece of history that continues to captivate archaeologists and historians alike.
There's huge areas of the world that have never been looked at by archaeology at all, or if looked at by archaeology, looked at only minimally. It's really important to understand that archaeology is often driven by accidental finds.
In the shadowed depths beneath the temple of the ancient city of Taposiris Magna, located along the Egyptian coastline, a monumental discovery was made by Kathleen Martinez of the University of Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, and her team.
Let's call in the archaeologists to make sure that we're not going to wreck any ancient archaeology while we're doing this. And that's a lot of archaeological discoveries are made as a result of that.
During their meticulous excavations, they unearthed an extensive tunnel plunging 13 meters underground, expertly carved through 1,305 meters of sandstone. This architectural feat, standing 2 meters tall, has been hailed as a geometric miracle by the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities for its engineering precision and scale.
It's interesting that the patterns are geometrical. Someone made it, and it involved a very large amount of organized labor in order to make it. There had to be the will and the intent in order to do that.
The Eupalinos Tunnel, extending over 10 to 36 meters, was an unparalleled achievement in ancient engineering, mirroring the complexity and ambition of the Taposiris Magna tunnel, though the latter's function remains a mystery. Despite being partially submerged in water, the tunnel's purpose, beyond its architectural resemblance to historical works, is still under investigation. The driving force behind Martinez's dedication to Taposiris Magna since 2004 has been the quest to locate the final resting place of Cleopatra VII, the last queen of the Ptolemaic dynasty.
Are we looking at the traces of a forgotten episode in human history? I think so. I think that's what's going on here.
The excavations at Taposiris Magna have not been in vain, revealing artifacts and signs hinting at the presence of Cleopatra and her ancestors. Founded around 280 BCE by Ptolemy II, a direct descendant of one of Alexander the Great's generals, Taposiris Magna is steeped in the legacy of its founders. The temple, believed to be dedicated to Osiris and his consort Isis, also aligns with Cleopatra's efforts to embody Isis, strengthening her divine legitimacy.
This is a very neglected area of the world as far as deep and ancient archaeology goes.
Discoveries within the temple complex have included coins adorned with the likenesses of Cleopatra and Alexander the Great, alongside figurines of Isis, suggesting a vibrant cultic activity centered around these figures. Additionally, Greco-Roman burial shafts unearthed within the site hint at the potential for finding tombs similar to those Cleopatra and her consort Mark Antony might be interred in, raising the possibility of uncovering their final resting places. Looking forward, the exploration is set to extend into the Mediterranean Sea, following the trail of a series of devastating earthquakes between 320 and 1303 CE that led to the partial submersion of the temple complex. Prior excavations have also indicated a network of tunnels connecting Lake Mariotte to the Mediterranean, suggesting a broader scope of investigation in the quest to unravel the mysteries of Taposiris Magna. The tunnel discovery, yielding artifacts such as pottery and a limestone block, adds to the anticipation of what lies ahead. As articulated by Zahi Hawass, the former Minister for Antiquities, the discovery of Cleopatra and Mark Antony's tomb would be a landmark event of the 21st century. Nonetheless, the significance of the findings at Taposiris Magna transcends the search for royal tombs, shedding light on the rich and complex history of this ancient city. The ongoing excavations promise not only the potential revelation of royal tombs, but also a deeper understanding of the cultural and historical landscape of ancient Egypt. Moving on, the mystery of the Osiris shaft, a hidden gem beneath the sands of the Giza plateau.
But he found evidence of deliberate burial in a very complicated, difficult cave system, which you can hardly access.
Is this shaft connected with ancient Queen Cleopatra? This ancient marvel is a deep dive into Egyptian engineering brilliance and a profound testament to their religious beliefs. Carved straight into the bedrock and plunging about 30 meters, which is nearly 100 feet underground. It's a 3-level journey into the past, where architecture meets the afterlife. Right at the doorstep of the Pyramid of Khafre, the entrance to this subterranean complex is anything but ordinary. It's like stepping into a different realm, starting with a modest antechamber that serves as your welcome or warning of the mysteries that lie ahead. This first stop is simple yet precise, a showcase of the ancient Egyptians' mastery over stone, but the adventure only deepens from there. A narrow passage takes you to the second level, a larger space carved with burial niches. Imagine this as a VIP section for the afterlife, likely reserved for those with a direct line to the gods or high standing in society. It's a clear sign that you're moving closer to something sacred. Then comes the final plunge to the heart of the Osiris shaft. Here, in the deepest chamber, you're greeted by a scene straight out of mythology. At the center, a massive granite sarcophagus sits partially submerged in water, which seeps in naturally from the limestone. This isn't just an engineering feat, it's a direct nod to Osiris, the god of the afterlife, whose story is intertwined with the Nile itself. The water here isn't just a natural occurrence, it's a symbol of life, death, and rebirth, mirroring the Nile's life-giving floods and Osiris's own resurrection story. The genius of the Osiris shaft isn't just in its construction, though carving such a complex directly into the bedrock, managing groundwater, and ensuring stability is nothing short of astounding. It's also in how it weaves together functionality and deep religious symbolism. This place wasn't just meant for burying the dead, it was a canvas on which the ancient Egyptians painted their beliefs in the afterlife, a physical journey through the underworld that mirrored the soul's passage to eternity. In the end, the Osiris shaft stands as a profound expression of ancient Egyptian architectural and religious thought, a place where the physical and the spiritual meet, carved deep into the earth. The Osiris shaft presents a fascinating narrative of ancient Egyptian beliefs, ingeniously encapsulated in a subterranean complex. This enigmatic site, stretching deep beneath the sands, offers a rare window into the Egyptians' sophisticated burial practices and their reverence for Osiris, the deity of the afterlife and rebirth. The discovery of varied sarcophagi within its depths speaks volumes about the social tapestry and the evolving customs over millennia from the Old Kingdom through to the Ptolemaic period. It's intriguing to see how granite and basalt sarcophagi, earmarked for the elite, coexist with simpler wooden ones, suggesting a resting place for a wide spectrum of society. The assortment of burial goods unearthed here, from pottery intended for afterlife sustenance to ushabti figures meant to serve the deceased beyond death, underscores a firm belief in an existence after life. These artifacts weren't just symbolic, they were envisioned to spring to life in the afterlife, attending to the deceased. The presence of jewelry, amulets, and various ritual objects further accentuates the shaft's spiritual significance, painting a vivid picture of the personal beliefs and the societal stature of those entombed within its chambers. Less common than in grandiose tombs but equally telling are the inscriptions found within the Osiris shaft. These hieroglyphic texts, drawn from the Book of the Dead, offer prayers and spells to aid the deceased's passage through the underworld, revealing the religious literature that permeated burial rites at the time. The shaft's design and function serve as a profound testament to the myth of Osiris, creating a physical manifestation of the underworld and mirroring the god's mythical entombment in the Nile's waters. This architectural homage to Osiris not only marked the site as a burial ground, but also as a sacred space for pilgrimage and worship, drawing followers to engage in rituals and offerings. The use of water in the deepest chamber, symbolizing purification and rebirth, reflects the Nile's life-giving floods controlled by Osiris, reinforcing the deity's association with agriculture and resurrection. Some theories even suggest that the Osiris shaft's alignment might connect the deceased with celestial bodies, embedding them within the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth, a concept that highlights the Egyptians' advanced understanding of cosmology. Exploring the Osiris shaft thus unfolds a rich tapestry of ancient Egyptian life, belief, and architectural prowess. It's a narrative that transcends the mere act of burial, revealing a culture deeply immersed in the mysteries of the afterlife, the divine, and the cosmos. The Osiris shaft stands not just as a monument, but as a bridge between the earthly and the divine, offering invaluable insights into the spiritual and everyday lives of the ancient Egyptians.
The archaeologists and the prehistorians, people are looking at that, have failed to take into account the severity of these events we're talking about. You don't realize the extent of the total remodeling of this planetary surface that took place. Because the question always is, where are the artifacts? Where's the pottery? Where is the evidence that this civilization existed?
Randall Carlson's theory about advanced ancient civilizations is truly fascinating and a bit of a departure from what we usually hear in mainstream archaeology. He's suggesting that highly sophisticated societies might have existed tens of thousands of years ago, way before the traditional cradles of civilization like Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China came into the picture. Imagine civilizations thriving before or even during the last ice age, which wrapped up around 11,700 years ago. That idea alone pushes back the conventional timeline of human development by several thousand years. Now, when you look at the evidence Carlson brings to the table, it's primarily centered around those massive and mystifying megalithic structures scattered across the globe. Take the Pyramids of Giza, for example. Their alignment with the stars of Orion's belt and the precision of their construction is just mind-blowing. Or Stonehenge, with its solstitial alignment standing there on the Salisbury Plain.
Two of these shafts go all the way through the body of the pyramid and exit on the outside and actually point at particularly significant stars.
These structures suggest that the people who built them had a far more advanced understanding of astronomy than we usually give them credit for. Carlson dives into the engineering and architectural skills of these ancient builders. He talks about how they constructed these massive stone structures, some involving stones weighing several tons. Just think about the logistics of transporting and precisely placing these enormous stones over great distances. It indicates a level of engineering know-how and physical physics that seems way ahead of their time. Now moving on. Randall Carlson's theory about ancient civilizations is absolutely something different, isn't it? He really makes you think about the roots of our history in a new way. Just consider the megalithic structures scattered all over the world.
When you account for the rise of sea level and the isostatic subsidence of the sea floor, it's not at all implausible that you had a large island complex in the mid-Atlantic Ocean.
Carlson sees these as evidence of advanced prehistoric civilizations. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, is made up of over 2 million stone blocks, each weighing tons, and they're all placed with incredible precision. It's not just about the sheer size, but the sophistication in their construction. And it's not just in one place. These megalithic structures are everywhere, from the stone circles in Europe to the pyramids in Egypt and Mesoamerica. Carlson points out that the similarities in construction techniques and astronomical alignments across different cultures hint at a possibly shared or globally distributed source of knowledge. It's like these ancient builders were all tapping into the same advanced understanding, which is pretty mind-blowing to think about. Now, where it gets even more intriguing, is how Carlson links the disappearance of this advanced knowledge to catastrophic events. He often refers to the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, suggesting that a comet impact might have triggered drastic climatic changes at the end of the Ice Age.
You may have periods of time where you have multiple impacts occurring over a short period of time associated with the destruction and disintegration of large comets.
Imagine massive flooding, climate shifts, and entire civilizations collapsing. It's like something out of a movie, but Carlson suggests it could be what wiped out these advanced societies and their knowledge. But here's the thing. He thinks this lost knowledge didn't just vanish. According to Carlson, it lived on in myths, legends, and religious texts, which he sees not just as stories but as historical records. Take the flood myths, for example, like Noah's Ark or the Epic of Gilgamesh. Carlson sees these as allegorical references to actual historical events, like massive post-glacial flooding. He believes that remnants of knowledge from these advanced civilizations were passed down through generations, albeit in a fragmented and symbolically encoded way. Moving back to megalithic structures, Randall Carlson's work on the astronomical alignments of megalithic structures is like peeling back layers of history to reveal the deep astronomical knowledge of ancient civilizations. Take the megalithic temples of Malta, Hagar Kim, and Menajdra, for instance. These structures aren't just old, they're among the oldest freestanding structures in the world, dating back to around 3,200 BC. What's really remarkable about them is how they demonstrate an intricate understanding of celestial movements, particularly the solar cycle. When you look at these temples, especially during the equinoxes, it's like watching a celestial dance choreographed by ancient architects. At Menajdra on the equinoxes, the sunlight filters through a specific aperture, illuminating an inner stone slab. It's this incredible precision that highlights how the builders weren't just stacking stones, they were aligning them with celestial events, marking the change of seasons with architectural precision. But it's not just about alignments. The architectural design itself is a marvel.
Some reference to such an event can be traced in many of the legends and myths surrounding these stars that have come down to us from nations far removed from each other.
The layout of the temples seems carefully planned to align with the sun's position at significant times of the year. For example, the main axis of Hagar Kim is almost perfectly oriented to where the sun rises during the solstices. It shows a level of planning and understanding of the sun's movements. And then there's the construction itself. We're talking about huge megaliths, each weighing several tons, placed with such accuracy that they align with celestial events. It wasn't just a matter of brute force, it required sophisticated knowledge of astronomy and construction techniques. Plus, they used local limestone, which is abundant in Malta. The complexity of these temples goes beyond just their size or the weight of the stones. They have multiple apses, altars, and intricate carvings, all forming part of a complex architectural design. The series of semicircular chambers connected by a central corridor, and their alignment with specific astronomical events. The pyramids of Giza, especially the Great Pyramid, the precision with which these pyramids align to the cardinal points of the compass is just mind-boggling. Think about it. The Great Pyramid, built for Pharaoh Khufu around 2580–2560 BC, is aligned almost perfectly north, south, east, and west. The northern side aligns to within a fraction of a degree of true north. Considering the era it was built in, that's an incredible feat of geometry and astronomy. The construction techniques themselves are a mystery. The ancient Egyptians might have used stars or the sun's path to find true north, which implies they had advanced surveying techniques and a deep understanding of angles and straight lines. It's impressive when you consider the tools and technology available at the time. Then there's the fascinating Orion correlation theory. This theory suggests that the layout of the three main pyramids at Giza mirrors the stars in Orion's belt. Proponents like Robert Bauval believe this alignment was intentional, reflecting a belief in the connection between the heavens and the afterlife.
They speak of these two regions of the sky, the southern sky with the stars of Orion, and can we move one slide up? Here's a nice view of them. They're pristine, by the way. It's really eerie how they carve those texts by hand, and some of the details is extraordinary.
With Orion associated with Osiris, the god of rebirth and the afterlife, the pyramids in this view were not just tombs but also celestial maps and gateways for the pharaoh's soul to the afterlife. The smallest pyramid, Menkaura's pyramid, is slightly offset, mirroring the offset of the smallest star, Mintaka, in Orion's belt, which adds another layer of intrigue to this theory. The design of the pyramids also incorporates alignments with the sun and specific stars and constellations. For example, certain shafts within the Great Pyramid align with particular stars. These could have been more than architectural features. They might have held spiritual significance, possibly serving as pathways for the pharaoh's soul to the stars. Also, on specific days of the year, the sun sets between the pyramids, creating a visual spectacle likely significant in ancient Egyptian ceremonies. Now one of the most known megalithic structures.
Would it be fair to say that there's an element of a rediscovery of a lost technology from the past?
I think it would be fair to say that, yes.
Stonehenge, out there on the Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, England. What's particularly fascinating about Stonehenge is its astronomical alignment and how it was constructed. The way it lines up with the summer solstice is probably what it's most famous for. On the longest day of the year, the sun rises right over the heel stone, which is set just outside the main stone circle. As the sun comes up, its rays shoot straight through the entrance and light up the center of the circle. Stonehenge also aligns with the winter solstice and possibly other celestial events. During the winter solstice, the sunset is framed by those massive stone trilithons, and some experts think it might even line up with lunar phenomena, which just adds another layer to how the builders understood both the sun and the moon's movements. When you think about how Stonehenge was built, it's even more mind-blowing. The final form was completed around 2500 BC, but it was built in phases over about 1,500 years. The main part of the monument is made up of these huge sarsen stones arranged in a circle, and there are smaller blue stones that were brought over from Wales. That's over 150 miles away. And then there's the layout of the stones. They're set up in this specific geometric pattern with an outer circle, an inner horseshoe arrangement, and those trilithon structures. The precision in the layout and how the stones are oriented show a really deep understanding of geometry and astronomy. It's not just a bunch of rocks placed randomly. Everything at Stonehenge is set up with purpose and meaning, which makes you wonder a little bit, doesn't it?
So this, if it were true, and it is true, would put the Sphinx back to a much earlier period, which would tie in with Schwaller's work and John Anthony West's subsequent work, that there were indications that dynastic Egypt as we know it, going back to about 3000 BC, was really a legacy of what I call now an earlier cycle of civilization.
Robert M. Schoch, a geologist with a PhD from Yale University, came up with a fascinating idea in the 1990s about the age of the Great Sphinx of Giza. He noticed something interesting about the erosion patterns on the Sphinx and the surrounding area. Unlike the typical wind and sand erosion you'd expect in Egypt's deserts, these patterns looked more like they were caused by water. This was a big deal because it suggested that the Sphinx might be much older than we thought. Now, Graham Hancock, a well-known British author who loves digging into ancient mysteries, found Schoch's theory really interesting and started supporting it.
Since the early 1990s, question marks have been raised over the age of the Great Sphinx of Giza in Egypt. Egyptologists think it's about 4,500 years old, although there's not a shred of inscription evidence to support this date. Independent researcher John Anthony West and Robert Schoch, professor of geology at Boston University, have made a case that the Sphinx must be much older than that.
Hancock is known for questioning the usual stories we hear about historical and archaeological sites. Schock's theory caught his eye because it suggested that the Sphinx was around during a time when Egypt had a lot of rain, which was way back around 8,000 to 10,000 BCE. This idea of heavy rainfall leading to the erosion we see on the Sphinx today is really cool, but also quite controversial. You see, traditionally, archaeologists have dated the Sphinx to around 2500 BCE, during Pharaoh Khufu's time. They base this on where the Sphinx is located in the Giza pyramid complex and how it looks compared to other stuff from that period. But if Schock is right and the Sphinx was actually built when it was much wetter in Egypt, then it could be thousands of years older than we thought, maybe even dating back to the Neolithic era. That's a pretty big shake-up in how we think about ancient Egyptian history.
To put it bluntly, the Sphinx did not originate with Khafra in the 4th dynasty, and really the beginning of my serious work and career looking at ancient civilizations.
Instead of the typical wear and tear you'd expect from wind and sand in a desert, the Sphinx had features like deep cracks, wavy lines on its limestone walls, and smooth, rounded edges. These are the kinds of things you usually see with water erosion, not wind or sand. Now, the Sphinx is made out of limestone, which is pretty easy for water to wear down. And what's interesting is that this limestone is made up of different layers, some harder than others. Schock saw that the water erosion affected these layers in a way that you wouldn't really see if it was just wind and sand doing the damage. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. Schock looked at the climate history of the Sahara Desert and the Giza area and found out that way back between 10,000 and 5,000 BCE, this place wasn't the dry desert we know today. It was actually pretty wet, thanks to something called the Neolithic subpluvial phase.
We know there were hyper-arid Sahara conditions on the Giza Plateau for the last 5,000 or so years. And this ties in with the origins of civilization, according to the standard story, which is that civilization began between 4,000 and 3,000 BCE.
This was a time when there was a lot more rain. So Schock thinks that this rainy period might have caused the kind of water erosion we see on the Sphinx, suggesting it's much older than we thought, maybe even dating back to these wetter times. This goes against the usual dating of the Sphinx to around 2500 BCE during Pharaoh Khufu's reign, based on its style and where it's located in the Giza pyramid complex. Schock's idea definitely shakes things up in terms of how we think about the Sphinx's age. So Robert Schock didn't just look at the Sphinx in isolation when he was thinking about this whole water erosion idea. He actually compared the wear and tear on the Sphinx with other ancient limestone sites that had been exposed to a lot of rain. This was his way of checking if what he saw on the Sphinx matched up with known patterns of water erosion elsewhere. It's like looking at different worn-out jeans to figure out if they got ripped from climbing trees or just from washing them a lot. He found sites with a clear historical background where they knew for sure that rain had done its thing over the years. When he looked at these places, he noticed that the erosion patterns were quite similar to what he was seeing on the Sphinx. This kind of bolstered his argument that the erosion on the Sphinx could really be from water, not just wind or sand.
You look at the evidence, and that's really where I was coming from. But my point is that even in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when I first got involved with this, if I looked at it critically, the evidence was not that definitive for the age of the Sphinx.
Schock's approach was pretty comprehensive. He wasn't just a geologist looking at rocks. He was also considering the weather patterns from thousands of years ago and what archaeologists were saying about these ancient sites. It's like he was piecing together a big jigsaw puzzle from different fields of study. But of course, there are always different sides to a story. Some critics pointed out that the erosion could be due to other natural processes unique to the Giza area, like fluctuations in groundwater, or the way certain chemicals in the air might wear down the rock. And then there's the whole thing about what archaeologists have found around the Sphinx, like artifacts and writings that suggest it was built around 2500 BCE, during Pharaoh Khufu's time. This kind of goes against Schock's idea that the Sphinx is way older because of the water erosion. So it's a bit of a puzzle with some pieces still missing. Graham Hancock has this really intriguing idea about an ancient civilization that he thinks existed way before the ones we usually learn about in history books, like the Egyptians, Sumerians, and the Indus Valley folks. He reckons this civilization was around many millennia earlier, and that it might have been wiped out by a huge comet impact around 10,000 BCE. Imagine that a whole advanced society just gone in the blink of an eye, leaving only bits and pieces behind. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Hancock thinks this civilization wasn't just hanging out in one spot, it was all over the place, having a global influence. He suggests that after whatever disaster hit them, the survivors might have traveled far and wide, sharing their knowledge and helping kickstart other ancient cultures. Hancock dives into myths and oral traditions from all over the world too. He's not just dismissing these stories as old wives' tales, but considering them as potential historical records. For example, he's really interested in the flood myths that pop up in different cultures. He thinks these might be a collective memory of a real event that had a huge impact on this lost civilization.
The best explanation is that floods of icy meltwater released by the heat and kinetic energy of the impacts flowed off the North American ice cap and into the Atlantic Ocean, where they interrupted the Gulf Stream, a key element of the central heating system of our planet, hence the sudden and dramatic cooling.
Now, Hancock is big on astronomy. He points to how some ancient structures, like the Giza pyramids and the Sphinx, line up with certain stars and constellations. He thinks this isn't just a coincidence, but a sign of advanced astronomical knowledge. He's also into the idea that these ancient folks understood the precession of the equinoxes. That's a fancy term for a slow shift in Earth's rotation over a 26,000-year cycle. If he's right, it means they were way ahead of their time in understanding the cosmos. Graham Hancock has this captivating theory about ancient civilizations and their architectural wonders. He's really into how these old structures, like the pyramids in Egypt, Stonehenge, and those incredible megalithic sites in South America, show off some serious engineering and architectural skills. Hancock reckons that to build these things with such precision and detail, those ancient folks must have had some advanced knowledge and technology that we don't usually give them credit for. Take, for instance, the way the stones are cut at Pumapunku in Bolivia. Hancock points out that the cuts are so precise, it's as if they had access to some really advanced tools. And when it comes to building massive structures, he's all about the techniques they must have used. He's amazed at how accurately these huge stones were fitted together, often without any mortar, and wonders how on earth they moved and positioned stones that weigh several tons. This isn't just your everyday heavy lifting. We're talking about some serious know-how in engineering and possibly some clever uses of leverage and pulley systems. Now he doesn't stop there. He's also fascinated by the mathematical and geometrical knowledge that these structures reveal. He talks about the use of the golden ratio, pi, and precise angular measurements, which shows a sophisticated understanding of math and geometry. Like, take the Great Pyramid of Khufu. Its alignment, the way its base is perfectly level, and the precise angles of its sides. Hancock sees this as evidence of a much more advanced understanding of geometry and engineering than we might think. Then there are the monumental buildings in Mesoamerica, such as the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan and the Mayan pyramids. Hancock highlights their architectural sophistication, urban planning, and the use of large stone blocks. All of this, to him, points to a level of technological proficiency and knowledge that goes way beyond what we've traditionally thought was possible for these ancient cultures. In a nutshell, Hancock is looking at these ancient structures and saying, hey, there's more to the story here. He's suggesting that these civilizations had a depth of knowledge and skill in construction, engineering, and mathematics that challenges our conventional understanding of ancient history.
It wasn't something the Maya made up. The Olmecs used that same symbolism. So the Mayan calendar is actually an Olmec calendar. And if we then consider the possibility that the Olmecs may just be the latest, the earliest surviving manifestation of that calendar, it could go back.
Then there's Teotihuacan in Mexico. Hancock looks at the layout of this ancient city and sees a kind of mirror image of our solar system's planetary orbits. To him, this suggests that the people who built Teotihuacan had a pretty detailed knowledge of astronomy and space. Stonehenge in England is another example. Hancock thinks it was used as an astronomical observatory because of how it aligns with the solstices. He sees this as further evidence that ancient people understood celestial movements really well. And let's not forget about the Pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza. During the equinoxes, this pyramid casts a shadow that looks like a serpent. Hancock sees this as a sophisticated way of tracking the sun's path, again showing an advanced understanding of astronomy. Hancock also dives into the idea of precession, which is this slow wobble in Earth's rotation that takes about 26,000 years to go full circle. He looks at how the Giza pyramids align with Orion's belt, and how the Sphinx lines up with the Leo constellation during what's known as the Age of Leo, around 10,500 BCE. He thinks these alignments aren't random but deliberate, showing that the people back then understood this complex astronomical phenomenon. So, in a nutshell, Hancock is really into the idea that ancient structures around the world weren't just built for the heck of it. He believes they were deliberately aligned with stars, constellations, and celestial events, showing that ancient civilizations had a much deeper understanding of astronomy than we usually give them credit for.